Morning, Pat. Thanks for having me, man. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. So you wrote a book, was it last year? The Faucian Bargain? And
Earlier this year.
Earlier this year. Okay. And now you've got an additional chapter, the Faucian Booster. You are probably as big a fan of Dr. St. Fauci as we are. And so I wanted to talk to you about, his continued nightmarish guidance of America during this COVID-19 scam. And also about the vaccine, which now Rochelle Walensky has admitted doesn't really stop you from contracting the virus. So tell us about this new chapter, first of all.
Well, Faucian Booster, if you go back and read Faucian Bargain, Pat, we decided to stop at the vaccine rollout just simply because there was no real data yet to analyze.
Yeah.
And so we figured it would maybe take a year to get that data. If when Faucian Bargain came out at the end of March, if I had gone online on Facebook and Twitter and said, I predict that these things will lose efficacy so fast, they'll be talking about third boosters by Labor Day, I'd have been either suspended or banned.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And yet here we are.
Yeah.
And what's fascinating to me, and this has been the pattern, Pat, this entire scamdemic, this has been the pattern, in that the virus is very real. All of their policies are fake unless they're specifically devised for authoritarian endgame, because none of them work. And the more they don't work, we saw this with lockdowns and masks last year, the more it was clear they don't work, lockdown and mask harder. You're seeing the same pattern now with the vaccines. Mm-hmm. The more and more they lose efficacy. If you go look at the data trend lines for these vaccines until about the 1st of August, which is about 2 weeks of the incubation period after Delta became the ascendant strain, they have just frankly collapsed since then. Well, so when they were working great, no one was talking about mandates in April or May, but the minute that they started collapsing, suddenly now they've got to mandate it, okay? And so we decided to add a bonus chapter because there's just not a lot of places people felt they could go for objective information, and we don't believe a constitutional case will matter. We think that the people that largely govern us, whether Republicans or Democrats in power, are operating in a post-constitutional era, like a post-Christian one. So citing certain, case in point, they're citing this Jacobson precedent from 1905, which was actually about the Massachusetts State Department of Health, and also was dealing with viruses like smallpox that had a 30% case fatality rate into the 20th century, far more serious than what we're dealing with now. So we wanted to make a moral and ethical case based on what was pronounced after the trials of Nuremberg, when the Nazis mass experimented on millions of people, as we're doing now. And there's things you're going to learn in Faucian Booster that I don't think a lot of people know. For example, there was no major big pharma corporate investment in messenger NRA technology until 2008. This is the first time we've done mass injection of this sort of technology into people in world history, and we decided just to go ahead and throw caution to the wind and let's put it in 5.86 billion people and see what happens.
Jeez.
That these things absolutely operate different than any previous vaccine technology. They may turn out to be superior. We just don't know that. And that the vaccine maker that has produced the product with the highest amount of antibody response, Moderna, had never previously successfully brought a product to market, Pat. They were 0 for 9, including a product just weeks before COVID-19. That was the first time that they had advanced to even mass human trial, and it failed so miserably. Merck, maybe the biggest big pharma company in the country, they glommed on to Operation Warp Speed right away, and then they could not come up with a vaccine whose efficacy justified the side effects, and they bowed out. See, there's a lot of things here I think people don't know that they deserve to know in order to make an informed consent.
Well, you talk about the efficacy. I've got a story that came out just today about Pfizer and BioNTech talking about their infection levels tumbling. They were at a peak of 88% effective a month after receiving the 2-shot series. And then after 6 months, they're down to 47% efficacy. That is unbelievable.
And that's what they're telling you. 2 weeks ago, Gilead came out with a study that showed remdesivir, which is a garbage drug. It's never worked for anything. It's been known to cause renal failure. There was a study done at the University of Iowa just in July in my backyard. They put it in their university hospital, and what they found is when it wasn't working, it was actually prolonging hospital stays. So Gilead comes out with an independent study on remdesivir that shows, hey, this thing will really, really reduce hospital stays and having to get hospitalized. They did all the studies themselves. They all self-reported. And, oh, by the way, here's what they didn't tell you. For a drug that supposedly keeps you out of the hospital, the only way you get remdesivir is to go to the hospital. So they left that little part of it out of their report. And this has gone on this entire time. All these numbers and stats you've seen, because these are all emergency authorizations, these things, usually they can take up to 10 years for full FDA approval because they vet all these things. None of this has been vetted. It's all been self-reported. If you get these vaccines, and I'm not here to dissuade you from getting them, I'm here to help you make an informed choice. You need to know you are part of an ongoing real-time human experiment. You need to know that these things, with the increasing strains, they're losing efficacy in weeks or months. You will not just get this one time to satisfy your employer. You are going to be part of an ongoing booster program again and again and again. You may be okay with that, but you should be told that.
Exactly. Yes, this third booster shot is just the beginning because obviously this thing is not permanent. And so why would the third one be the be-all and end-all?
Yeah, see, Canada's already ordered 4 years' worth of booster shots. Canada has from Pfizer.
Oh, my gosh. That is absolutely outrageous.
Yeah, this isn't going to end anytime soon, and you're going to have to repeatedly get a booster to be a citizen in good standing.
Yes.
Which is unconstitutional.
It's not an immunization. I think what we're learning here is a lot of people, when they hear the term vaccine, they think of when we were kids, if you're Gen X or older, and the traditional vaccine cocktail that you got to go to public school, or that I had to get updated to do a mission trip to Haiti a few years ago. All right.
Yeah.
And instead, you don't pay attention. Like my local drugstore here in Des Moines last fall had a sign for the shingles vaccine. And it says, and the sign said right there in the parking lot, the new and improved shingles vaccine. So does that mean that the other one was crappy and didn't work? And I think people don't understand that when they still think it's the 70s and 80s. And so when they hear the term vaccine, they think they're getting an immunization, that they're not going to get something. And what's happened is this term has been redefined. It's being redefined at the CDC level, at the corporate level, and it's now defined as anything that lessens symptoms as a therapeutic is now considered a vaccine. And I think a lot of people are shocked to be seeing the amount of numbers of breakthrough cases. Massachusetts is now reporting that the final week of September, 49% of their deaths were fully vaccinated. Connecticut reported earlier in September, 1/3 of its hospitalizations were fully vaccinated because I think people thought they were getting an immunization and they weren't.
Well, and what we're being told is, okay, right, it's the efficacy is not there as far as preventing you from being infected with this virus, but you're not going to get it sick and you won't be hospitalized. Well, that's not true either.
It's not true. It's still. Here's my concern. My concern is we have what is called a leaky vaccine. And I work with a proud anti-vaxxer. My employee, Todd, is one of those. Okay? And so we've had these conversations for years and years and years. And I've got a large contingent of so-called anti-vaxxers in my listening audience, and God bless them. They're living through the greatest case for their belief system of all time right now. It's hard to argue against them, okay? But I think a lot of them are kind of rooting for this to be a leaky vaccine. That's the worst case scenario, and here's why. If it is really a leaky vaccine, and I can explain that if you want, if it's really a leaky vaccine, they're not going to stop the mass vaccinations. And so what happens when you get a leaky vaccine is it's a little bit like when you're out on the open sea with a leaky boat and it springs one hole and you plug it. You spring another hole and you plug it. All right, you don't have another boat to get into. You're sort of trapped. So you just keep closing up holes even and staying in the boat, even though the boat obviously is insolvent. And if they're going to continue with mass vaccinations with a leaky vaccine, what's going to happen, and I fear for what's going to happen here up north. We saw this with just the Sun Belt wave where you all live. August of 2021 was deadlier for both COVID and overall mortality than August of 2020 was. And
that's
so
incredible.
My fear is they're making these that the variants will get increasingly worse, and they'll put you in a situation that if you don't have any form of natural immunity whatsoever from a prior infection, what happens if they don't stop mass vaccinating with this leaky vaccine, they're going to put a gun to everybody's head. And they're going to make it because this thing's going to continue to get worse. And if you don't have any natural immunity at all, you're really going to be cornered and trapped here. And that's my fear of what is going on.
One of the really scary stats from your update on the Faucian booster is that here in the United States, where we've got over 75% of adults receiving at least one dose of the vaccine, we still had a 324% increase in cases. That's incredible.
Yeah, that's what a leaky vaccine looks like. And so there are two kinds of vaccines in vaccinology. There's what's called a perfect vaccine. And the way that works, to put it in grade school terms, me and everyone else can understand this early in the morning, is that when your body recognizes when the body recognizes the virus, all right, it repels it with the antibodies that a vaccine produces. In a leaky vaccine, what happens, and there have been examples of this. Sometimes it's referred to as Merrick's disease. There's been a couple of other leaky vaccines in history. What happens is when your body recognizes the virus, then in a leaky vaccine, it binds it. And so we see evidence of this. Our CEO, Tyler Cardin, sent me a study from two of the biggest counties in Wisconsin about 2 weeks ago. And they looked at the viral loads of those who had been vaccinated and those who had been unvaccinated. And what they found was when the vaccinated tested positive in two of Wisconsin's largest counties, they actually had a slightly higher viral load than those who were unvaccinated did. That's evidence of binding, meaning that your body doesn't repel it; it starts attracting the virus. It binds it more. It creates a higher viral load, and you end up with the very asymptomatic spread we all feared last year that turned out to be the biggest canard of this, except it's the vaccinated who are the asymptomatic spreaders.
Oh my!
Sometimes in the anti-vax movement, this is called vaccine shedding, okay? But this is a result of leaky vaccines. And the data, there's plenty of data out there that at least warrants that this continues, and or that this should be further investigated. And Pat, if it continues, then you end up with a very serious phenomenon called antibody-dependent enhancement, or ADE.
Right.
And this is where now we just create the virological equivalent of a circular firing squad. We have to keep vaccinating because the virus gets worse, but the more we vaccinate with these leaky vaccines, the worse the virus gets. So, to me, we've got to go back to natural immunity and get an actual immunizing Salkian type of vaccine, or there's no way out of this.
So, Steve, you just mentioned our CEO, Tyler Cardin, who has, been very vociferous on social media. He has said that there's no way he's going to enforce these kind of mandates where, Joe Biden says, make sure your employees are vaccinated. So here's my question for you. What are you telling your audience as far as people that are being told by their bosses, by their employers, their companies they work for, you better get this shot by such and such date, or you're out of a job? Like, what is your message? Because this is insane what we're up against here.
It's literal apartheid is what it is. And Keith, here's the thing. If these things don't stop transmission, and they don't, that's all the whole population epidemiological numbers show that. We had over 3 million more cases in August of 2021 than we had in August of 2020 when no one was vaccinated. And Rochelle Walensky, as Pat said earlier, admitted on CNN back on August 6th, they don't stop transmission. So if they don't stop transmission, then what is the medical and ethical justification for mandating a vaccine? This is purely now a personal decision. This is really just about what risk are you willing to take? Are you willing to risk the adverse side effects of these vaccines, or are you willing to take your chances with the virus But the idea that you would walk in unvaccinated as some mass asymptomatic super spreader at an event just simply isn't true. If anything, it's the other way around. So there's no medical or ethical justification for mandating these at all.
We're talking to Steve Deace, who hosts our afternoon show here on The Blaze. Starts at 11 Central, 12 o'clock Eastern, and wrote the book, The Faucian Bargain, and now has an addendum to that book. Steve, do you think this is about control? Is it about money?
Yes.
Both?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very little. There's very little here that's about a virus, and the fact that we're sitting here in 2021. Now, Pat, I grew up asthmatic. I was in and out of hospitals all the time as a kid living in Florida. Okay, and so I know a lot about respiratory viruses. I've lived with one and respiratory infections, and the idea that in the year 2021, until they came out with remdesivir, which doesn't work, in October of last year, we told people for 8 months that if you test positive for a respiratory virus in 2020, because we're out of copper bracelets and leeches, the best we could possibly do is send you home to isolate. And if you have no symptoms in 10 or 14 days, go back. If you get so bad, come to the ER. We'll put you on a ventilator. Is just garbage. They killed people. They killed thousands of people with that.
Yeah.
They're still doing it now. The denial of early treatments. The data on hydroxychloroquine as a cocktail is good. The data on ivermectin is even better. And yet they've continued to deny these. The one big pharma early treatment that works, the Regeneron, the monoclonal antibodies, most people had not even heard of that, even though it saved Trump's life back in October probably of last year. Most people hadn't even heard of it until Ron DeSantis made it portable in his state.
Yeah, 70% decline.
Then they tried to discredit it. And then when they couldn't discredit it, now like all Marxists do, they want to ration it. I don't know what other solution to come to other than, it's Occam's razor time. They're literally trying to kill people. I've held off for a year just saying that out loud, and I am just saying it out loud now because I don't know what the other option is to continue to deny these early treatments. At first, you could have said, well, they want to get more people vaccinated, and if they promote early treatments, then people won't get vaccinated, and that's what they really need. Except they're still doing it while the vaccine data collapses. So then tell me what the new benign explanation for that is. I don't know.
And they're doing such an effective job at deflecting all the blame from them and right back onto anybody who's not vaccinated. Those of us who have resisted the vaccine and just want to take our chances, frankly, and don't understand why, if you've been vaccinated, you're so damn afraid of the rest of us. Leave us alone. And they've done a really effective job of turning the American people against themselves.
Because they do the same thing on race. They do the same thing on ethnicity.
Yep.
They do the same thing on class and poverty. It's the same game plan from all the same people. I've had people over the years ask me, I mentioned Todd earlier, has been my assistant now for 6 years. People ask me all the time, are you worried you have an anti-vaxxer working for you? Well, I've sat next to Todd almost every weekday for the last 6 years. And you know why I'm not worried? Wait for it. Because I'm vaccinated. That's why I'm not worried. If I got vaccinated and I had to be worried about poor Todd Erzin and his 4 daughters and wife, well, your vaccines kind of just suck at that point, and I got bigger problems.
Right.
So this is really an admission that you don't believe in your vaccines. It also, I think, is a cultic mentality. You take the same risk I did, or you're a terrible person. Do the same things I do, or you're a terrible person. This is the same mentality you saw in ancient Israel in the Valley of Ben Hinnom when thousands of people were waiting in line to throw their babies into the fire to Moloch. And if 1 or 2 people were like, I seem to recall Moses telling us not to do stuff like this, I think I'm going to bow out. The rest of the line looked at you and said, hey, if you don't go through with this, our crops will fail next spring. Okay? Same mentality you're dealing with here.
Boy, it sure is.
So what's next for America? Where do you see us 5-10 years from now, man?
I don't know that I see in America on this path 5 or 10 years from now, and I'm not being hyperbolic.
I gotcha.
I'm not. I think that we have a very limited window. The good news is more of our people are waking up than ever before. The bad news is I still don't think most of them truly understand the level of confrontation it is going to take and uncomfortability they're going to have to be able to get comfortable with in order to undo this. You won't be able to vote your way out of it. You can't just sit there and wait to have Mitch McConnell Senate Majority Leader again next year and do nothing for you. You don't have 3 years to wait for Trump to run again. Hell, he's 80. Who knows if he even lives for 3 more years at that age? You don't even know that. The time is actually now. And the answer is us. Yeah. And we have to start mass defiance, mass refusal. People need to essentially every peaceable means necessary of civil disobedience. It's time to practice that now.
And that's really scary because those of us on the right are just not comfortable and not used to doing that. Right. That's just not in our DNA. We don't do it. And so we're going to have to. We're going to have to change, and we're going to have to. So I hope we're up to the challenge. I really do. I hope and pray we're up to the challenge.
Fauci ever going to be held accountable for his gain-of-function research connections that you discussed a few weeks ago? It doesn't seem like that's going to go anywhere.
Probably not in this life. No.
Yeah.
Well said.
Great answer.
Well said.
All right. Steve, we'll be listening for you at 11 Central, 12 Eastern. Also, how do people get their hands on the book?
Just go to Amazon. You can download the chapter right now. Faucian Booster and you can get Faucian Bargain there still as well if you would like. But Faucian Booster right now, it's $2. That's it. That's our cost to print that up and put it out. We're going to make like awesome. 30 cents or something per copy. That's it.
I mean, seriously, it's such a great book. It's a required reading for my kids who we homeschool. It is so well done. I want them to understand the ins and outs of this entire calamity, and your book is the source for that, Steve. Great job with it, guys.
Great information, really as always. Thanks a lot, Steve. Appreciate it.
All right, take care, guys. God bless.
All right, you too.